I'll be seated. L'shana tova umetuka. I am sure that most of you have heard the familiar school playground chant at some point during your childhood. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Our tradition teaches the opposite message, that sticks and stones can only break bones, but words have the power to destroy, as can withholding them. Tonight, I'd like to talk about the creative and destructive powers of human speech. I have told this story previously, so to those that were on my search committee or have seen my rabbinic website, bear with me. This story remains as timeless as the message is also worth repeating. First, I want to set the stage. The year was 2022. The pandemic had finally lifted a bit, and that summer, many people decided to flock to Europe. With staff shortages, long travel delays, and lost luggage, traveling was often a nightmare for all parties included. This evening, I want to speak about one such travel experience. My husband and I flew to a friend's wedding in an era I like to call LBR, Life Before Rena, our daughter. After having Rena, I know for certain that every parent who flies with their infant is a hero in their own right. This travel experience is not for the weak. We settled on a flight on a budget airline that did not provide the most comfortable flying experience, and sitting behind me was a young family with an infant who simply was not having it. And like infants tend to do when they haven't yet developed language skills to express their feelings and are feeling uncomfortable, this baby began to scream. His parents tried everything to soothe their screaming child, but with a major turbulence, they were unable to leave their seats. Then, the unthinkable happened. The adult woman that was sitting across the aisle from me, seated next to her partner and her young grandchild nonetheless, turned to the baby and his flustered parents and exclaimed at the top of her lungs to shut the blank up. Was this woman really screaming expletives at a helpless child and his overwhelmed parents? In my bewilderment, I looked in her direction and was met with an unrelenting finger of the middle variety. I was so utterly shocked that I didn't move or say anything. In fact, every single passenger within earshot stood by idly after this incident. No one, including myself, had the courage to defend these helpless parents. I spent the following 3 hours balancing both confusion and great sadness for the parents in need, and sadness for this woman who thinks it's okay to treat the most vulnerable in this manner. Sure, we all know that crying babies are difficult to sleep through. No need to remind new parents of this fact. But did she understand how hurtful that was? I will never know what this woman was living through in that moment, be it familial issues, health challenges, anger towards Spirit Airlines' outrageous model of providing an inexpensive flight with 1 million hidden fees. However, I do know that she most likely was completely clueless about the weight of her words and the pain that she most likely caused these poor parents. This woman allowed her words to pierce like daggers towards parents that were just trying to do the best they could given their circumstances. And everyone else, including myself, who stood idly by, would we have done so had physical violence taken place? I bet not. Cussing out a helpless infant and their parents is most certainly an extreme example, but my charge for us this evening is to not turn a blind eye, but instead to call out hateful speech every single time we hear it. Judaism has a lot to say about the weight of our words. There's a concept in our tradition, koach hadibor, meaning power or strength of our speech. This concept is so vital in our tradition that my sixth graders devote an entire 4 weeks to learning about it. To all my sixth graders in attendance and watching online, you will be quizzed next week. I hope you are taking notes. Just kidding. Our words hold so much weight that when used as a weapon, they also have the power to greatly embarrass someone, just as that woman successfully did so on the plane. Our tradition takes this act of injustice very seriously. As we read in Bava Metzia 58b12, anyone who humiliates another in public, it as if they were committing murder. The act in Bava Metzia is labeled as halbanat panim, literally translated as causing the face of the person who was insulted to turn white. This expression is taken so seriously in Judaism that it is additionally written in Sanhedrin 69a that it is better that a person would go to the furnace of fire and be dead than cause someone else humiliation and shame. Public embarrassment takes up a lot of airtime in our ancient text, with some pretty cruel and unusual punishments. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, commonly referred to as the Chofetz Chaim, wrote a lot about the weight that our speech holds. The Chofetz Chaim taught that anyone who desires God's assistance in keeping the mitzvah of Shmirat HaLashon, or of guarding one's speech, one should repeat the verse from Ki Titzei that we read a few weeks ago. Zachor et asher asa Adonai Elohecha leMiriam b'derech b'tzeitchem miMitzrayim. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way out when you left Egypt. A little refresher here. Miriam said some pretty not nice things to her brother Moses and was stricken with sara'at, a pretty uncomfy and very noticeable skin condition. Suddenly, she became feared by the entire community and was therefore sent into isolation. What comes with Shmirat HaLashon, guarding one's speech, is the rejection of a human habit that is tossed around a lot in the Torah and in Jewish spaces, Lashon Hara, or literally evil tongue. The Torah sees such harm in this act that on more than one account, it is equated to murder. As we read in Proverbs 18:21, Mavet v'chayim b'yad lasho, death and life are in the power of the tongue. The Talmud explains in Archin 15b that negative speech is worse than a sword, since it kills many people, even at a great distance. Similarly, speech is easily compared to an arrow. Once the words are released, like an arrow, they cannot be recalled. The harm that they do cannot be stopped, and the harm that they do cannot always be predicted, for words, like arrows, often go astray. Rabbi David Wolpe, Rabbi Emeritus of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, teaches about confronting Lashon Hara with an awkward no. When someone turns to you with a juicy piece of gossip or wants to tell you something cruel about someone else, your response should be the awkward no. What if instead your response was, that really doesn't make me feel closer to you. I don't want to hear that thing, whatever it may be, about other people. But we can react in a way that will discourage the person from saying it again. We read in Archin 15b, Rabbi Ishmael said that one who engages in gossip is guilty of a sin equal to the 3 prohibitions for which a Jew must accept death: idolatry, adultery, and murder. If this isn't motivation to step in with an awkward no, I don't know what is. While we have this provided blueprint that warns us of misusing our speech, our tradition still recognizes our inclination to speak cruelly. The prayer that we will recite as a collective in the matter of days, al-Chet, in which we beat our chest for a whole list of transgressions we may or may not have been guilty of, include many related to speech. And for the sin we have committed before you with an utterance of the lips, and for the sin we have committed before you through speech, and for the sin we have committed before you by verbal confession, by the impurity of speech, and so on. Let's think about this. Additionally, included in the al-Khaitz are punishable offenses, such as bribery and extortion. Yet, transgressions regarding speech are the most numerous. These sins of speech go well beyond using obscenities, but they are instead examples of using language in a variety of ways to hurt people. One can make amends monetarily for causing financial harm, but the harm done by speech can never be repaired. In today's domestic political landscape, no matter who you are voting for, I hope we can all be in agreement that slandering one's opponent to gain votes instead of speaking about one's own platforms is incredibly divisive and dangerous. While hardly a new phenomenon, there is no shortage of insults, mudslingings, and distortions in today's political arena. No matter how often candidates swear they'll run a positive campaign, issue-oriented campaign, negativity swoops in quickly and outlandishly. It is estimated that in 2024, U.S. political ad spending will vault past $12 billion. Incredibly, this is nearly triple the $4.25 billion that was spent in 2016. According to Open Secrets, a nonpartisan nonprofit leading research group tracking money and U.S. politics, during the 2022 midterm elections, more than 69% of the $2.1 billion spent during that cycle went towards attacking federal candidates. We are spending billions of dollars on cruelty. According to a University of Chicago study, negative campaigning has been known to lower the feelings of political efficacy, trust in government, and overall public mood. From a historical perspective, it is worth considering, too, that increased news media focusing on negative advertising itself has helped accelerate the trend of negative campaigning, creating a vicious cycle of attack politics driven by political consultants and journalists. Politics aside, there is another type of bad speech that I have yet to mention, silence, or shtika in Hebrew. What does it say about each of us when we fail to speak up for someone who is being mocked or treated poorly? The ancient rabbis teach that shtika kehoda'a dameh, silence is akin to assent, meaning our failure to speak turns us into accomplices in verbally insulting and or harming other people without even opening our mouths. Rabbi Bradley Artson, dean of my husband's alma mater, the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, responds to this Talmudic verse with a question: how often do we face acts of injustice or callousness with silence, whether it be a derogatory joke, an act of selfishness, or cruelty, or by simply reading of political oppression in our newspaper? All of these laid out instances summon us to choose a side. He teaches that we can either verbalize our opposition immediately, or through our silence, we become allies of the acts or words we abhor. There is no neutrality in either instance. Silence is indeed assent. Protecting our speech is so fundamental to our tradition because if we think all the way back to the book of Genesis, speech was the tool of creation. Our creation story doesn't begin with lightning or with thunder or the earthquaking as we saw during the revelation at Mount Sinai. We read in Genesis 1:3, and God said, "Let there be light." The creation story simply begins with words because, as Rabbi and author Baruch Halevi writes, from a Jewish perspective, Words are the building blocks of creation and the cornerstone of every relationship. Speech is at the center of all of our relationships with ourselves, with others, and with God. Every morning we are encouraged to recite the words, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, meaning blessed is the one that spoke and the world became. Speech is so essential to our creation story that we must be reminded of it daily. We are prompted by the miracle of God's ability to speak something into existence from nothing. How might we use our speech for good in instances that make our blood boil? How should our college students react after walking past an anti-Israel protest? As difficult as it may be, speak your truth. Report the incident to your university or ADL. Write a letter to your state senator. Reach out to Hillel and or other Jewish campus organizations to see if there are organized responses or gatherings. Your clergy team is here for you. We can only imagine how difficult it is to be a college student in today's climate. We must remember that as human beings, we can never unhear something. Did that unruly passenger ever think that she would be mentioned in 2 of my High Holy Day sermons? Most likely not. And as the great Jewish humorist Sam Levinson once said, it's not so hard to be wise. Just think of something stupid to say and don't say it. And this evening marks the first moments of 5785. I want to encourage us all in the upcoming year to use our speech for good. May we strive to be more deliberate about our word choices, to lift up the downtrodden, to get all of our hostages home, and to correct evil tongue when we hear it. This year, may we return again to the best versions of ourselves. L'shana tova umetuka.